there, welcome. My name is Jason, and today I'm here to introduce a plant to you called the Phalaenopsis Orchid. This is also referred to as the Moth Orchid, and this is a very, very popular plant. You will be able to find this in bloom throughout the entire year at a number of different locations and nurseries. And today I'm here to, I had some requests to post a video on Phalaenopsis care, so here we are. And thank you again to my subscribers. I really, really appreciate all of your support. And anyways, here we go. So Phalaenopsis Orchid, you're going to want to start with selection. So you want to select one that has vibrant leaves that are very upright and sturdy. You're going to want to select a plant that has, nice green roots that are healthy. You want to make sure that there's not a lot of rot going on. You really don't want rot on your roots. There are some pests that get on your plants, examine to make sure there's no spider mites or mealybugs. Once you've checked all of that out, you want to select one that has nice blooms. And it's basically up to you, If you do want a longer bloom cycle, it is beneficial to pick an orchid that has additional blooms, buds on the ends, flowers that have not opened, because that will mean that you have a longer bloom cycle because part of the plant is not bloomed, but it will bloom for you at your house. If the orchid that suits your fancy isn't, if it's in full bloom, that's totally fine. The flowers do last a long time anyways. So, that's also an option as well. Know that when you bring your orchid home, it is normal sometimes to experience a couple flowers to drop. And usually if that happens, it's from the top, because these were the first flowers to bloom, and they are the oldest ones on the plant. So those will fall first, and then it'll be progressively downwards until they've all bloomed and fallen off. At that point, that's when you want to remove the spikes, and so you'd want to follow the stem, the flower spike, all the way down to the base of the plant and cut it about ½ an inch away from the plant. You want to do that with both spikes once they're done blooming to signal this plant that it can go back into a growth phase and that you can get it back into the cycle of seasons that it needs to get into. And so what I was mentioning is you can get this any time of year. The natural time for this plant to bloom is in the spring, though. So, through temperature and light, greenhouses have been able to make this plant bloom so that we can have it throughout the entire year, which is pretty awesome. But that also means if you want to continue to keep your orchid after that and you want it to bloom again, just be patient with it because it will need to get with the cycle of the seasons. Part of that is choosing a good location. To help encourage your plant to understand the seasons, place it in close proximity to a window, just so that when there's a dramatic temperature change outside, like say it's winter, it gets a little bit of chill. You don't want to put this plant outside in the winter, that will freeze it. So just put it in close proximity to a window so that it can experience a chill. You don't want bright and direct light for this plant. You don't want direct sunlight because that will burn it. So if you have a window that has bright and direct light, what that will do is when the winter comes, it'll sense that temperature change. It'll experience the shorter days and longer nights from the daylight outside. And those two things in combination will really help encourage this plant to understand what season it is in. And so that hopefully in the spring, after you get the plant, or the next spring, it will bloom again. And as far as choosing a container, I like the glorified saucer. It's essentially a pot with no hole in the bottom, because you have a plastic semi-pot around the plant, and there is a hole in the bottom of that. So there's drainage there, and this is like just a big giant saucer. What that does is it gives you lots of flexibility to, if you want to change up the container later on, you can do that. And you can, if for whatever reason you do get a lot of flower spikes when your plant reblooms, and it's really heavy, and they're awesome when there's lots of blooms, but not when they're falling over. So what you can do is you can either get a bigger pot and put rocks in the bottom to weight it, or you could use the same pot if it's deep enough and just put rocks in the bottom to weight it. Your plant's not going anywhere. So that's a pretty awesome thing. As far as once you've cut the flower spikes off, like say the blooms are done, that's also the time that you want to repot your plant. And you want to repot it every 1 to 2 years. And what I recommend is just using the pre-mixed orchid bark that's already been provided. There are plenty of amazing recipes out there for orchid bark. I just find it easier to go and get the stuff that the pros have already made. So I recommend getting orchid bark, replacing the orchid bark, cleaning this plastic container. I like to pot it right back into the plastic container. Unless you are potting it up, in that case I recommend potting it up into a larger plastic container. You can add holes on the side if you like to increase aeration, and then just put it back in the pot. Whenever you do make cuts on the roots, make sure to use clean, disinfected pruning shears. Make sure all of your materials are very clean. I will be posting a video on orchid repotting, so stay tuned for that. This video, however, is just on orchid care. And so, moving on, when it comes to watering your orchid, that's a very, very important thing. You want to allow your potting medium to dry out about 50% in between waterings. And you don't have to get it perfect, but that's just what you want to aim for. And what's really nice is that if you pull the plant out of its pot and you have it in this clear plastic pot, you can see right through to the medium and the roots, which is really beneficial. It can help you guesstimate. Also, the weight of the plant, if you keep in mind the weight of the plant once you've watered it versus when you come back to water it, you'll kind of know the difference between saturated potting medium and dry potting medium. So, it's a pretty forgiving plant. You might end up needing to water this 2 times a week, once a week. In the winter, you do want to reduce the waterings. As far as fertilization goes, you want to fertilize this plant twice a month, spring through summer, and then once a month in the fall and winter. When this plant goes back into bud to bloom again and starts blooming, you do not want to fertilize this plant at all. You also can skip on the fertilizing in the winter if you really want to, or you can fertilize it once a month if you want. In the winter, that's fine. Just when you get your buds, you really don't want to be fertilizing your plants because you want it to go into a bloom phase from the growth phase. As far as pests and diseases, if you do get pests on your plants, just make sure to go get an insecticidal soap that is formulated and safe to use on orchids. As far as the fertilizer that I had just mentioned, there are a whole bunch out there that are amazing. The one I like to use is called Organic Orchid by Espoma, and I really, really like this because it works great with my orchids, and it contains bacteria that are beneficial to the potting medium for the plant, which is pretty cool, and I've had good luck with this. So that's just an option, but yeah, there are many choices out there. That's just one that I like to use. I think that's about it. As far as toxicity goes, this plant is rated as a non-toxic plant, which is pretty awesome. It's very safe for any and everyone and everything. Yeah, if there's any questions that you have about one more thing. I know that there are those of you that, once the flowers are done, some people throw their plants away. And, it is what it is. Everyone has their own thing. I recommend, though, if you're not going to keep your orchid, and you don't know anyone that's going to adopt it, and that is your kind of course of action, just use the green bin. There's the compost bin right with your trash bin that the trash people come and pick up. That's a quick way of sending it right back into the circle of life. And if you do that, just make sure to remove anything that's not plant material. So I'd remove this plastic pot and these plastic clips. The bamboo and the orchid itself and the potting medium are all okay to put in your compost bin. If you are a composter and you hot compost, this is green and brown, which is, it's already... Anyways, orchid, you do not hear anything I had to say about composting or putting you in the... Anyways, if there's any questions that you might have about this plant that maybe I haven't covered in this video, please feel free to let me know in the comments below. And thank you so much for hanging out. My name's Jason.